Today I am walking down Forbes Avenue in San Rafael, California, and I want to talk to you about a new warning that I've never really gone over before here on the channel when it comes to buying renovated houses, because so many buyers today, they want to buy a house that is turnkey. Most people don't want to do the work themselves. It's very appealing to just walk through the door, move in, and everything is already done. All the hard work is done. All the permits have been pulled, or so you think, and you can move in with peace of mind knowing that you don't really have to lift a finger for a while because everything is brand new. Well, it's not really that cut and dry, guys, because here's the thing. More and more home buyers today are finding out that sometimes when they buy a house that's fully renovated, that the renovation wasn't done correctly and it wasn't done with permits, and then they're the ones holding the bag in the end. A story that was sent to me by a couple of different people actually is another story out of Miami about two different home buyers that purchased a home that was completely renovated, and they thought they were getting a deal. They loved the house. The one guy moves into the house, and then 2 months later he gets a knock on the door from the building inspector, and they told him that his house is under violation. Another woman in Miami had a similar experience when she bought a house, and a couple of months after she moved in, she got a letter from Miami-Dade County's building department. And she was pretty much in shock. She was like, is this some kind of mistake? But it turns out that both of these homes were actually renovated without a permit. Like nothing. They pulled no permits to do anything. Now, I don't know how the city found out that the renovations were done, or the county found out that these renovations were done without permits. I don't know how they knew that. Maybe some of the neighbors snitched. I don't really know. But that's not really the point. The point is they had all kinds of things that were done to these homes that were in violation. The plumbing, the electrical, windows, the roofing, all of these things were done without the proper permitting. The man says he spent so far about $20,000 hiring new contractors to open new permits to get the home in compliance with the city's building code. And the woman has now dropped over 40 grand in fines owed to the county. Now, both home buyers claim that they had no idea that these renovations were done without permits. Whether or not that's true, we don't really know, right? Because this is only one side of the story. There is always a possibility, especially in Miami, that there was some kind of underhanded deal where it's like, oh, here's a renovated house. We'll sell it to you at a discount. You take the chance in case there's some kind of issue with the permits. And sure enough, that's what's happening. Now, both of these home buyers did a home inspection before they purchased, and they both paid for a title search, and the issue of unpermitted work never came up. And it wouldn't, because the only way that's really going to come up is if there are any open permits that are pending on the property in the title search. If there's no open permits, then nothing's going to show up. So if they never pulled any permits to begin with, why would there be any open permits? You see what I'm saying? Now, normally when you buy a house, you will get something called a seller's disclosure that will tell you any of the renovations or problems that the house potentially has that the seller is aware of. And if the seller lies to you on this seller disclosure form, then you have grounds to sue them after the fact, after you purchase the house. However, neither one of these buyers ever received a seller's disclosure, which was a huge mistake in their buying process, okay? Like, for example, my office in Miami, Beachfront Realty, they require a seller's disclosure as part of the submission package. Like, if you're working with a buyer, you have to submit the contract, all of the addendums for the contract, the escrow deposit, and a seller's disclosure in order for the office to accept this. We won't close one of the deals without having a seller's disclosure. It's a requirement. But the interesting thing is receiving a seller's disclosure is not a requirement by law. It's not a Florida law. It's just something that some offices require just to protect buyers against situations exactly like this one. Now, of course, having a seller's disclosure doesn't make you bulletproof. Even if you had the seller's disclosure, one of these buyers, for example, and they found unpermitted work after the fact, then they still have to go through the nightmare of suing the previous owner and trying to get their money back, which means probably a long drawn out litigation process and could potentially be expensive and maybe not even worth it. But at least you have that option Whereas if you didn't receive one of these disclosures and you kind of just bought it as is, well, you're completely on the hook. You're the new owner. It's on you now. You have no recourse against the previous owner. At least I don't think so. I'm not a lawyer, but anybody who out there who is one can maybe back me up on that. So what every buyer out there should be doing, regardless of if you're in Florida or any other state, this is something you should be doing. If you buy a turnkey house somewhere, you need to make sure that the proper permits were pulled for all the renovations in the house. That should be part of your due diligence process, which I know it sucks, but if you really want to protect yourself and make sure you don't get hit with a situation like this, it's really the only way. So what you need to do is you just need to go to the building department of your city and your county and double check all the renovations for the property and see if there are any permits that are still open. Make sure all the permits are actually closed if they did pull them. And if you don't see any permits, well, that's a huge red flag. And if you don't see it, but you still like the property, then that's when you need to request from the seller proof and verification that they did in fact get all the proper permits. And if they can provide you legitimate documentation, and for some reason it's not recorded with the city, then that might suffice, but I would still be cautious on that moving forward. You know, that could still be a red flag. Like, it's already bad enough that people are buying today and kind of getting ripped off still because the price of homes is still too high in many areas of the country. Most places have not come down to a number yet that really makes sense. So it's bad enough you're already paying high prices. It's bad enough you're still paying, you know, over a 6% interest rate and record high property taxes and homeowners insurance. The last thing you need is to get hit with these surprise expenses, because there's already so many surprise expenses when you're a homeowner. You just don't need this. Now, one of my viewers, Carl, wrote me an email a while ago, and I'm just now getting around to sharing this with you guys. But this is something also that everybody can do in order to save some serious cash when they go to buy another home. It takes full cooperation between the buyer and seller, but if you can pull this off, it is totally worth it. And here's what it is. Whenever you buy a home, usually whenever you become the owner, that property will be reassessed at the new purchase price. And then starting with the next tax season, your property tax bill is going to go up. It's happened to millions of people over the past few years. And I have covered many stories of that here on the channel, of how those property taxes have gotten so high for so many that a lot of people can't even afford it anymore and now need to sell their home that they just bought a couple years ago. But Carl has used a strategy in the past that he claims has worked well for him over the years in real estate. And this is something that I've never heard of before. And you can essentially prevent the property from being reassessed when you buy it. And this is how. First thing you need to do, you need to get the seller of the property to agree to sign over all of the interest in the property to an LLC, or a limited liability company, that is currently owned by them. Okay? So if they need to open up a new one, that only takes a few days, and then they can go ahead and transfer the ownership of the property to the LLC. And then you go through the buying process as normal. You put a purchase contract in to the seller, and then you go through the rest of the sales process as normal. You write up the sales contract, you put your deposit down, and instead of transferring the ownership of the property to you at the closing, what happens instead is the ownership of the LLC is actually transferred to you at the closing table once everything is done. And essentially, in the eyes of the local county, the local government, this property was never sold. Just the ownership of the LLC who owns it was sold. And this supposedly does not trigger a reassessment of taxes. Now, I don't know if this works everywhere. I've never even heard of anybody doing this before, but it is very clever, and it's something that you should look into. I think I'm actually going to try this the next time I buy real estate and see if it works. But when you just look at the sheer numbers that people are paying in property taxes these days and the egregious increases, it's definitely worth a shot, guys. The only problem I can see with this method is there's not a whole lot of incentive for the seller to cooperate, right? Like, a lot of sellers don't like messy transactions, and this could sound very suspicious to them, almost like a scam. It needs to be presented to the seller in a very professional way and make them understand why you're doing it like this. And also, it could even tip them off and give them an idea to buy their next home the same way, to prevent them from seeing that increase in property taxes as well. According to Carl, he says this is perfectly acceptable to any lender. and the buyer can offer to pay for any of the attorney costs that the seller will potentially incur for all the paperwork that needs to be done with the LLC and stuff like that to kind of grease the wheels a little bit and get this thing to go. However, like I said, not all sellers are going to be open to this. It might sound suspicious. Right away, they might think it's a scam, and I don't blame them. There are too many scams out there these days. And if I've never heard of this, and I've been in real estate since 2009, there's a good chance a lot of other people haven't heard of it either. But then, of course, if enough people start doing this, then the local governments may actually catch on and start requiring that the property gets reassessed regardless of an LLC being transferred over or the ownership of the property actually being transferred over. So it's going to be interesting to see how many people listen to this and actually try this out. And if you do decide to give it a go, or you've done this before, let me know in the comments. And speaking of taxes, here's something insane. This was something also that was sent to me by one of you guys, and that is California's new VMT tax. Now, what is that? Well, there's a new tax called the Vehicle Miles Traveled tax here in California, and this could add up to roughly $324,000 per housing unit in development costs. Now, the purpose of this tax supposedly is to reduce car trips by 50% by 2035. And developers must pay fees to offset the vehicle miles new homes would generate. But the thing is, here in California, it's already like the least affordable state to buy a house in the country for the most part. And if this all goes to plan, well, this could raise your monthly rent price here in California by as much as $1,350 a month, and it would make homeownership less attainable than ever with all of the increases in the costs. And the crazy thing about this to me is that instead of making it more affordable somehow to buy a house here in California, they're actually looking at making it more expensive just so they can get more cars off the road. Like, what is the end goal with that, guys? Does one state really think that they can save the whole planet with all their green energy initiatives? I mean, this just sounds delusional to me. I mean, maybe it's well-intentioned, trying to get more cars off the road, less pollution and all of that, but it is not realistic. California is a big state. A lot of the cities here require a car to commute somewhere. Even these areas I'm walking through here, these nice residential neighborhoods, you need a car to live here. You're not getting to your job that's 15 miles away by foot or taking mass transit here. It's not happening. Also, think about it like this. California has already been pushing away so many different businesses. Building a brand new development here is already difficult enough with all the environmental impact studies that are required, all of the permitting processes, everything like that. If you can even get the permit to build here, assuming you can go through all of that, what kind of developer is going to sign up for having an extra $300K in added costs per unit? And how are they planning to pass that cost along to the potential buyer? You see where the problem comes in? I mean, I really don't know who is thinking of these ideas here. There's so many problems in the state, and they're worried about getting cars off the street. And it's not even getting them all off the street. They're only looking at a 50% reduction. And what's the plan to get everybody to work every day? People who commute over an hour. I met a woman here who watches my channel, shout out to Elisa, who says she drives from Tiburon all the way down to Cupertino every day. It's like an hour and a half commute one way, guys. So imagine spending 3 hours of your day in the car to go to work. How is this tax going to solve that problem for her? That's what I would like to know. Because I know people here, and I talk to people here, and these things that they come up with just don't make any sense. Now let's switch gears and pick on Canada for a little while, because we haven't picked on Canada in a long time, specifically Toronto, okay? Because Toronto has seen a massive housing crash, and it's kind of a preview of what's going to happen to all the overheated cities here in the United States. And we've already been seeing it happen in a lot of places in Florida, in Texas, and in Arizona, Georgia. A lot of the Sun Belt states have been seeing major corrections / crashes in real estate. But in Toronto, home prices have come down so much there that the average home price has now fallen to levels that we last saw in February of 2021. Also, 3% of the current listings for sale in Toronto are power of sale properties, and the unemployment in the region has climbed to 9%, which is the highest that Toronto has seen in the last 12 years. Now, if you look at this chart here, they're using the average home price, not the median home price, but the red line is just the regular average home price, and the gray line is the adjusted average, okay? And what you can see is home prices now definitely are back to 2021 levels. And if it stays going like this, Toronto could easily see home prices come back down to 2020, 2019 levels, which would be amazing for people who live there that haven't been able to afford a home, but it's still going to be very expensive. Average home prices in Toronto are now more than 20% below their February 2022 peak. And after adjusting for inflation, the average prices have fallen even further back to 2017 levels. So this is actually really great news for anybody who lives in the greater Toronto area that has been patient and waiting to buy a home, because this market is like all the US markets on steroids, and it shows you the consequences of the aftermath. On the supply side of things, inventory in Toronto is near record highs, and the sales to new listings ratio sits at 37%, which puts Toronto firmly in a buyer's market. And going back to those power of sale listings, yeah, 3% of the listings in Toronto are power of sale. It's basically Canada's version of a foreclosure, although the lender doesn't even need to transfer the ownership to the lender. They just outright sell it from underneath you to get the cash. They skip a step. They can foreclose on you even faster over there. These power of sale listings have nearly doubled in just 1 year, from 400 last year to about 800 now. And we're going to be facing the same thing here in the US, guys, because in Canada, they have a weak job market, just like we do. They also have growing unemployment in Toronto, which is much worse than our national average here at 4.3%. They're facing 9% over there, more than double. So it's not looking good. So you don't have a lot of people who can actually afford to buy, even though the prices have come down significantly over there. And that might not be great for anybody who paid FOMO prices during the pandemic, but it's absolutely great news for people who have been complaining that they cannot afford the area for a very long time. So it'll be interesting to see how much further the Toronto market is going to fall, because it looks like, just like many places here in the US, that things are just getting started. Yeah, prices have been coming down for a couple years now, but there's no economic sign that there's going to be some miraculous recovery anytime soon. That's what people need to look at. Like, it's one thing to see prices coming down in any given area, but you got to look at these factors as well. What's the unemployment rate like? How's the local economy doing? What's the jobs numbers like in this area? And that'll start giving you a pretty clear picture on if that trend's going to reverse anytime soon or it's going to continue to get worse. My guess is in Toronto, things are going to continue getting worse before they get better. Maybe even see home prices crash 30 to 50% in the area. It's already over 20. Why can't it get to 30? Why can't it get to 40? You know, what's stopping it? But please, guys, do yourself a favor. If you want to buy a house that's been renovated, you're buying any type of a flip, make sure you dig into it. Make sure you get a seller's disclosure. Make sure you find out if there are any open permits and the proper permits were pulled on that property when they were renovating it, to make sure you're not getting yourself into a giant mess. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.